The electric automaker Rivian plans to cut 10% of its salaried workers, citing challenging macroeconomic conditions. That news emerged from the company's latest quarterly earnings report. WGLT's Ryan Denham is following the development and is here in studio to fill us in. Thanks for stopping by, Ryan.
Sure thing, John.
So Rivian's cutting jobs. Do we know how that impacts Rivian's workers right here in Normal?
Well, I don't expect it to be significant. Rivian won't break down the numbers exactly, so we don't know for sure. But the vast majority of the 8,000 workers here in Normal doing manufacturing work are hourly workers. So they're not in that salaried bucket. If they're cutting 10% of salaried workers and we don't have as many salaried workers here, you would guess the number would be relatively low. It's more likely that those cuts are going to be impacting the company's other 8,000 workers in places like California and Michigan.
Okay, so what do we know about why they're making these cuts right now?
Well, again, it might be a smaller number than we think it is. Of the company's 16,000 employees, only 10% of the salaried portion are being cut. Of course, the company has cash. It has over $9 billion in cash and cash equivalents. Total liquidity is just above that, but it is still losing money, and it's got some pretty big spending plans, including a $5 billion manufacturing plant in Georgia. Some of these cuts may also be like a signal to Wall Street and to investors that, hey, we see the hesitation in the demand for electric vehicles in the U.S. right now. We're not oblivious to that. We see other automakers preparing for a slower year with demand for EVs. So let's signal that we can be lean too. That might be part of it.
Well, let's talk about that. Why have there been so many negative headlines about electric vehicles recently?
Yeah, there have been a lot of them.
Yeah.
From Hertz, like the rental car company, was selling off a bunch of its EVs. Ford was slashing production of the F-150 electric version. GM was pulling back on its investment. Even Tesla, like the big electric company, was warning its investors that a pretty quiet year was coming up. So there's this demand issue. How much demand is there for EVs? Right now, interest rates are high, which makes it more expensive to buy a car. And the early adopters, the people who were going to buy EVs at the get-go, they've already bought them, right? So now it's like the mainstream buyers making decisions, and they're pretty sensitive to the interest rates and costs, right? So NPR's Camilla Domanowski is their reporter who covers the automotive industry, and she put it this way a couple of weeks ago, which I really liked. To the extent that all of this is prompting a reckoning, it's over the pace of the journey to electrification, not the destination itself.
Okay, so let's bring it closer to home again. How has Rivian, in light of all that, changed its own strategy?
It's doing a lot of cost cutting, a lot of things to make it cheaper to build the vehicles in the first place, trying to find efficiencies. These job cuts announced yesterday would be part of that. It's things like rolling out a new motor that they make in-house at the plant in Normal, which is cheaper. This spring, they're going to be shutting the plant down for a couple of weeks to make some pretty significant changes to supplier and component parts. Again, all aimed at lowering how much it costs to build a vehicle. The end result of that is going to be overall production capacity at the plant is going to go up 30%. Even if for a few weeks this spring, they're not going to be making vehicles. Here's Rivian Chief Financial Officer Claire McDonough explaining how all of these dots connect.
While the incorporation of new design changes impacts near-term production, we are confident it better positions Rivian to be more profitable and competitive over the long term.
They're also just narrowing their focus and prioritizing what they call growth areas. Like the big one coming up is in 2 weeks, they're going to be debuting kind of the design of the R2. So everything they make here in Normal is the R1, like Model 1. And what's coming next in 2 weeks is the R2. That's the cheaper, smaller SUV that's going to be built in Georgia, where Rivian is building a new plant. And importantly, it's going to be the first Rivian that is going to be sold globally. So even if demand for EVs is soft in the US, it might not be overseas at that time. So Rivian founder and CEO RJ Scaringe was asked about the strength of the shakiness of EV demand point blank on yesterday's earnings call.
We do think we're in a very interesting moment in time where there is a lack of choice of highly compelling EV products in that $45,000 to $55,000 price range. Recognizing The average price of a new vehicle transaction in the United States last year was around $48,000.
So that's R.J. Scarinz, the CEO and founder of Rivian. Ryan Denham is in studio here on WGLT Sound Ideas. Ryan, I think I've asked you this a couple of times, but Rivian, is spending a lot of money. It's not really turning a profit yet. Is there any idea when that could happen?
You are correct. Rivian is losing money, but just like EV pioneer Tesla did in its early years. I think it took about 18 years for Tesla to turn a full year profit. So yesterday's earnings call was just for the fourth quarter of 2023, so October, November, December. Rivian posted a net loss of $1.5 billion in that fourth quarter, which is a little bit more than what you make in a year, John. But quarterly revenue, though, so the amount of money they're bringing in from selling vehicles and other things, basically doubled up to $1.3 billion. And Rivian says it expects to achieve what it calls a modest gross profit in the fourth quarter at the end of this year of 2024.
That's WGLT's Ryan Denham, who has been covering Rivian for us for many years now. Ryan, thanks for joining us in studio and giving us this update.
Sure thing, John.
You can read more on this story and find a link to Rivian's shareholder letter that was released yesterday at WGLT.org.